This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this is our 2020 NBA Finals preview. It is between the Miami Heat and the Los Angeles Lakers. Two teams with very, very different ways of how these teams were formed, I guess is the best way to put it, all bringing us to this moment where under these extraordinary circumstances, destiny will smile greatly on whoever is going to host Poisson O'Brien Trophy. And it's amazing because we definitely have to look at how both teams did what they needed to do to get themselves to this point, and obviously break down their strengths, their weaknesses. There's so many things to get into. And it's such a unique circumstance because we're saying it's the Miami Heat and the Los Angeles Lakers, but there is definitely star power to be told in this matchup. And in order for us to be able to do that, I think this is too much a shoulder for myself and my co-host, my PNC, who I'm rolling out the red carpet in a moment to discuss. We had to bring on two guests. I didn't say one, I said two guests to help break it down. So first, let me roll out the red carpet. My man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping right in the heart of Party Central, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. You know what I'm saying? Just a stone's throw. I-95, short stone's throw away from them people wilding out down in Miami. What's good, brother?
I'm chilling. I'm chilling as a Celtics guy here on the show. Not really excited.
You sound like one of those onerous neighbors, man, to talk about quiet that noise outside, all of that damn partying.
Well, my wife is definitely a Heat fan, so to go on and turn on Channel 7 News and seeing Heat fans celebrating in the street for making the finals, I said, Jesus Christ. Well, nevertheless, here we are. Shout out to the Heat fans and to the Laker fans as well, too. This is going to be a great show, and I'm glad that we have two amazing guests representing both sides this week.
Absolutely. Now, before we go ahead and do our quick introductions, we got to do our plug and play. The Baseline NBA podcast, man, we've been doing this for quite some time. And again, under these extraordinary circumstances, it's always good to be able to roll with my brother from another mother, to be able to do this podcast. So as always, we encourage our fans and listeners who've been checking us out, who've been down with us since we've been covering the NBA restart all the way up into this point. Be sure to get at us at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. So we always encourage you, whatever platforms you use to listen to podcasts, be sure that you look for the Baseline, add us to your playlist, and allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things happening in the association. And if anybody really, really, really is down for the Baseline, then you have to go check out our website, thebaselinenba.com. That's right. Our podcast has a home. And as always, we love rolling out the red carpet to invite you in. So be sure to catch all of our previous episodes, especially the one we recently did. Great episode with Danielle Surrency Jones of Power Hands. If you guys are not on it, definitely go check that one out. Great conversation, but more importantly, a great brand doing great things in our communities. So be sure to check out that episode. All right. Now, let's get right to it. This is an NBA Finals preview. And in order to break down the preview, we have two excellent guests. One, actually both, who are fully vested in their respective teams between the Miami Heat and the Los Angeles Lakers. So, of course, this might be one of those death match conversations that might be had, but they're very sound-minded individuals. We weren't going to let them go ballistic. But on board with us, we have our man, for 5 Reasons Sports contributor, Heat's insider, our man, Brady Hawk. Brady, thanks for hopping on board with us, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
All right. And then also all the way to the UK, he is the host of the Lakeside Chat. He is like one of our big boys, on our friends. We've been on his podcast before. Definitely a diehard Laker. We got to bring him out here to talk Lakers stuff. And as always, man, we're just always enjoying the moment when our man Alen Ramic joins us here. Alen, what's going on, brother?
Good evening, guys. How are we all doing tonight?
Hey, man.
I'm pretty good.
I know you probably haven't slept since you
I'm chilling, bro.
railroaded the Nuggets, right? As far as
railroaded the Western Conference. But that's a different story.
Let him glow. Let him have his time, man. Let it go.
All right, so let's do this. We're gonna first talk about how both teams got to where they are right now, which is as of Wednesday, they will be facing off each other in the 2020 NBA Finals. And we're going to first start with the Miami Heat, because the Miami Heat really had a great, compelling series. While it did not go 7 games, but they were able to take out the Boston Celtics in 6. And so I want to start with you, Brady. What were your expectations of this Miami Heat team as far as coming into this NBA restart? I'm sure that you have covered much of the personnel and the players that are on this roster, and maybe to some people there was low expectations. Hey, maybe make the playoffs. Hey, maybe get making an interesting first round. Was there every expectation from what you've seen through the course of the year before the pandemic and then going into the NBA restart that gave you the confidence that this team was going to make as impressive a run as they've made thus far?
Well, heading in, this team was absolutely made for this bubble environment. So it was kind of looked upon that they would get to that second round matchup with the Bucks. And they've had a favorable matchup with them all season. They had a great matchup game plan to go up against them. So it was kind of expected that they could get to an Eastern Conference Finals. And that was pretty much the expectation as for me. But the players on this Heat team believed that not only could they get to the NBA Finals, but they could win an NBA Finals. That all starts with Jimmy Butler. He really thinks that this team, with this personnel, that they can do this, and it's proven true all along that they got here. But looking at each matchup, there's just they get here just based on every guy that they've had giving their own kind of playing their own role. Everybody, they kind of coming into this bubble, they all starting with Spoelstra had to accept the roles that they were given. A lot of adjustments were made rotationally and situationally. Both there was a lot of things that had to be changed, and they adjusted quickly, and then now they're in the NBA Finals. So for me, I this is above expectations for this team.
So, Brady, I'll follow up here. One of the things you just pointed out was really interesting to me, because the rotational change and the moves made by Spoelstra, even coming into the bubble, Kendrick Nunn with the COVID situation and kind of being ousted from the starting lineup, Dragic coming back into the starting lineup and playing like he's rejuvenated, or it's like they were saving him the entire year just so he could make this bubble run, so to speak. Myers Leonard was a big part of what they did in most of the rotation before the bubble, and now just he's a glorified cheerleader, great teammate, but he's not seeing 80 minutes out there. And your point about Butler just believing in everything this Heat roster can do, basically 1 through 15, everybody can contribute. Does that give you like that kind of just that overall sense of pride, and you hear the word a lot, that Heat culture, that it really will now be a chance for them to push this Lakers team? Because getting past Milwaukee, sure, that was great. Boston was the kind of the awkward matchup that no one was really quite sure of, but you've handled them in 6 games. Just talk a little bit about furthering these expectations and the overall rotations. Furthering expectations and the overall rotations that Spo has made throughout the course of the bubble.
Well, for starters, Kendrick Nunn, as you mentioned, and Myers Leonard are not in the rotation anymore, but that can change as quickly as anything. That is not set. He's basically said over and over that these guys can be put into this rotation at any time. He's a guy that's probably one of the best coaches at making adjustments on the fly. He literally says over and over that these guys are going to be picked and plugged in at any time. Derek Jones Jr. is another one that he sees his minutes once in a while, and then he doesn't play in the next one. You see now in this series, Solomon Hill's getting minutes over a bunch of guys. Kelly Olynyk's not getting minutes anymore. So there's a lot of things that go into it. Obviously, the Jay Crowder ascension at the beginning of the bubble was another thing that wasn't really expected as much of him to go on that huge shooting stretch. Obviously, before the last 3 games where he kind of took a down slope, but that earned him even more minutes. Obviously, he's a defensive guy, and then obviously they acquired Andre Iguodala for the reason that was shown last night, that he's going to be a guy that can close out games for them and get them where they want to go. So you look at all these guys on this rotation. There's just so many things that he can do with this whole lineup, and he's going to continue to change it because this is really his advantage, is that with this coaching this team.
Alen, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to bring you in on this, and I want you to talk about the other side of the journey for the Los Angeles Lakers and what they needed to do in order to get to this particular point. Now, their circumstances is obviously very unique, right? You're talking about a storied franchise where the expectations for the Lakers has always been you don't just get to the playoffs. You get to the playoffs with the intent to get to the finals. And then if you have a marquee player like a LeBron James who attracts and has the cachet to bring a guy like Anthony Davis on board, and basically you're looking at a very quick turnaround. Then this pandemic hits, right? Where all signs are pointing that it's the Lakers, maybe possibly against the Los Angeles Clippers, but then you have like this really interesting path that you take in order to get to this point. How surreal is it that you're hearing from your listeners, from your fan base, and even from yourself? How surreal is it for the Lakers to get themselves to this point? I don't know if whether or not there is enough appreciation for what LeBron and Anthony Davis and Frank Vogel and the Lakers organization have done to restore the greatness of the Lakers at this particular point. But I think people are starting to kind of feel that essence and that energy that's been long overdue since the post-Kobe era.
Well, all that, and then we didn't touch on the passing of Kobe Bryant as well. And I know it hit the whole NBA hard, but like the Lakers are an organization where Kobe is embedded everywhere. Like just look at Rob Pelinka, the vice president or whatever role he has, the GM, the de facto leader of basketball ops. He's Kobe Bryant's best friend and former agent. It was a huge task. Like just going back to a year ago, like because that's when the season started. They went to China. They had that whole problem with the Chinese government. Then they battled adversity throughout the entire season. People going, the Clippers this, the Clippers that, the Lakers are going to have turmoil. The Lakers have had no turmoil. Like internally, the Lakers have been sound as any team I've seen since I started watching the NBA. Like these guys are all really close knit. And then from my perspective, and we've talked about it on my podcast as well, I don't see how a team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis would have been bad. You know, like there was all these takes like the Lakers were more likely to miss the playoffs and win a championship. And I just didn't get it because you give LeBron the best big man in the NBA, like it's going to work. Like, and then you give him guys like KCP, who's been phenomenal since like 5 games into the season. Danny Green's been really sound defensively, even though his shooting woes are legendary now on Twitter. Kyle Kuzma took an ascension in the bubble, but then hit a slump during the Nuggets game. Alex Caruso's a legit NBA player. If people did not realize, this guy's really, really good. You don't have to score to be good at basketball. Dwight Howard's gone back to being Dwight, which was, well, Dwight like a 34, but you know, this guy was a super duper star. Like that's how good Dwight Howard was in his prime. And you just look at it and it's like these little redemption stories throughout the entire Lakers organization. And even Frank Vogel, like Frank Vogel flamed out in Orlando. People didn't think Frank Vogel would get another head coaching job. Then Monty Williams passed on the Lakers, and then Ty Lue infamously had his big birthday cake in Las Vegas celebrating the Lakers head coaching job and then reneged on it. And then Frank Vogel came in, and from his first press conference, he set the scene that he was maybe not the first choice, but he was that adult in the room that the Lakers needed at the right time. And it's a guy that LeBron seems to really, really respect, because you've heard nothing about coaching the entire year. It's all been for LeBron being super positive about Frank Vogel. So as a Lakers fan, it's been amazing to watch this team, man. It's really, really been an honor. You know, these guys have been awesome throughout the entire season, and now culminating in getting to the finals, which I always felt that we would get to the finals, but seeing it vindicated on, like you said, like everyone's starting to sort of realize just how good this team is. It's a great feeling, and it's been too long. And I know people say, oh, you know, you guys are entitled. Yeah, I support the Lakers. We expect greatness, just like you guys in Boston expect greatness. It's part of supporting one of the biggest franchises in the NBA. It's a part of covering the biggest franchises in the NBA. Like, you know, we should be good. Like, that's the Lakers' identity, is being good and having superstars. If you don't have that, it's not the Lakers. And don't get me wrong, that's coming from someone who absolutely love the young guys. Brandon Ingram, I'm so happy for. But this is the Lakers challenging for titles and hopefully winning them, because I don't want to jinx it on a podcast.
Fair enough. So a lot of great stuff there and stuff to unpack. And one of the things that I saw, especially on Twitter, was setting the stage for the Lakers, and I gotta listen, Alen. I can't. There's some Laker fans who are continuing to say, "Oh, we're underdogs." Get the F out of here. This Lakers team is not underdogs. They're not here by happenstance or by accident. Anything that had to do with that was just pure Lakers hate. Like people maybe not wanting to see
Precisely.
them, but to say that, but the Lakers have taken some of that on themselves. And even when LeBron said, "No one expected us to be," shut up. What are you talking about? like you just said, you had Anthony Davis. So I can't take that part of it. I can't understand. And I'm gonna get to my point. I'm off my rant. I want to know from you. Who do you think? Because this is the biggest question that comes up all the time. They set the stage. Oh, they got to get past Portland, and they're going to have to get past two MVPs in Westbrook and Harden. And then if they have to play, Kawhi and Paul George, that didn't happen. End up playing, a very game Nuggets team. But who is the Lakers' truly third best or / most important player? That question, I think, is still very much out there.
Well, I think before I touch on that, I'll touch on your point where I think that a lot of the Lakers fans say it very much in jest because we saw it with a lot, especially within the ESPN media. I'm not going to say much about that, but there's a certain underlying thing with them and the Clippers, and no one really picked but then obviously we took that as a joke and slighting ESPN because who doesn't love to do that? But touching on your point about who the third best player is, honestly, so far in the playoffs, it's been KCP, and people are surprised to hear that. Listen,
I'm not. I'm surprised you didn't. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I'm surprised you didn't mention Rajon first.
Well, what I was going to say about Rondo is playoff Rondo's a truly
that much more.
No. Playoff Rondo is a real thing, and I truly apologize for anything bad I ever said about Rajon Rondo. It is all worth it if we win an NBA title.
The fact that you even say his name correctly, we good. I cannot. God knows my biggest pet peeve is how many times people get Rajon mispronounces his name. It's so disrespectful. So disrespectful because it's Ra, not Ray. Stop trying to make him a part of Brandy's family. Okay, but go ahead.
But touching on that, it's just a Google search, or just listen to the guy talk about himself. He mentions it in every interview. It's Rajon, it's not Rajon. But touching on KCP. This dude, since everyone remembers just how badly he did on Kawhi Leonard in that first game of the regular season, which now feels like an eternity ago because it was. By the time the finals finish, it will basically be a year of NBA basketball, which is crazy. But is just his hustle. The guy is an awesome defender. He's probably our most consistent shooter. In the Denver series, he shot over 50% from the field. He shot 44 or 45%. Don't quote me on that, but a really high 3-point percentage. He's a guy that LeBron trusts to make shots. And you know what? He makes shots when you need him to make shots, which I love stats. I love analytics as much as anyone. But there's just, you need guys, and you guys have watched basketball for long enough to know analytics don't measure you hit shots at the right time. And KCP does that. And especially going into a matchup where you have guards like Duncan Robinson, Jimmy Butler, Goran Dragic, who I love, is one of my favorite players in the NBA. You need players like KCP who'll be there every single night and you can depend on them. You need players like that. Alex Caruso is another one. Rajon Rondo at this level has been fantastic. Hopefully he continues it in the finals. I don't see any reason why. But at this point, it's KCP. The only guy who I would say, if Kuzma comes out of his slump that he had in the Denver series, because he hit a very hard wall in that Denver series, still hit some very important shots. I don't know if you remember in the fourth quarter where the Lakers were up by 3. LeBron skips it to Kuz. He hits a 3 to make it a 6-point game when the Nuggets were sort of coming back into the game. He had a very rough series, but it's KCP in my opinion. But the beauty of this Lakers team is all it takes is one person to be that third guy on a nightly basis. It doesn't matter who it is. As long as one's firing, I don't see anyone beating LeBron and AD. And that's been my mantra from the start of the year.
You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, a 2020 NBA Finals preview with our special guest, Brady Hawk from 5 Reasons Sports, and my man, Alen Ramic from Lakerside Chat podcast. So I got this part of the show. I want to be able to do what I call is the crossover, where we actually take each of you guys to give some cross some cross team respect on what you see from the other side, since you guys are personally invested on each of your teams individually. So I'm going to start with you, Brady. Crossover respect of what you see from this, what you've seen from this Lakers team, how they've gotten here, and what if you are, say, a head coach, an assistant coach, a scout, or even an insider? What are you looking at to say, if I'm the Miami Heat, this is what not fear, but this is what I definitely have to look at in order to properly plan and strategize and prepare the Heat for battle against this said Lakers team?
Well, the thing that stands out with that is just that Miami goes better against smaller lineups. In that Boston series, Bam, when he can play the five, he's the only big in the rotation right now with Kelly Olynyk out of it. So with the Lakers' plethora of bigs, it's gonna be kind of a weird matchup thing to kind of see how the players match up if JaVale McGee or Dwight Howard's starting.
Real quick, Brady, do you think Spoelstra will roll out Olynyk or Leonard a little bit more in this NBA Finals?
For sure. I think he has to. He just ultimately can't go with Bam on or Dwight or JaVale the whole series, because ultimately he's going to need his time on AD. That's just a matchup that they're going to need to see, unless they go small and Jay Crowder guards one of their bigs, and just that's something that they've gone to a couple times this season as well. But ultimately, you're going to throw Kelly Olynyk out there into the rotation again. And as I mentioned before a couple times, I think Myers Leonard could actually work his way back into some play in this NBA Finals. Not a huge role, but I think he gets some playing time just to get some work down low, try to get some rebounds. That's another thing with this Lakers matchup. I think Miami's going to have a tough time getting rebounds just with their bigs. Bam Adebayo is just an energetic rebounder, but they're going to need to kind of find a spark on that end. So that's just pretty much it with the Lakers side. I think the big thing is a big part of it, and also I think just look at it from the other side. I think them missing Avery Bradley is going to be a big piece in this matchup. I think they definitely could have. I think Avery Bradley could very much be used in this lineup. In this matchup with the Miami Heat.
So, Alen, your turn. Give the Heat a little crossover love. What are some of the things that you're concerned about as a Laker insider analyst, from them if you're scouting them? And, hey, what's some of the things you need to take care of if you're the Lakers going against Miami?
First of all, a lot of people don't know this about me, but my brother's like the biggest Heat fan in the world. So I watch every single one of Miami's games with him. Erik Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA. That's simple. If anyone can scheme a certain defense to give the Lakers fits, it's Erik Spoelstra. That's how highly I think of him and his coaching staff. They are truly phenomenal. Like, I don't know if you guys remember in the podcast that got lost in the ether when you guys came onto my podcast, and unfortunately the software that I use decided to play up. That's putting it nicely. I've stopped using that software now. I always pick Miami as this dark horse team to make it potentially to the finals. It wasn't a surprise. You add Jimmy Butler to a group of guys who are really, hardworking. They have this mentality. And then you had a superstar who is of the same ilk mentality-wise. And I think Jimmy Butler's a superstar. He's a top 10 player in this league. We can stop all this. Is he a super? He is. Just straight up. He's that good.
I want to throw something in there though, Alen, because I love Jimmy Butler. I love Jimmy Butler's work ethic. I will say though that Jimmy Butler is a quirky player. He's one of those guys that, he's right there on the bridge of what you consider genius and just flat out insane, right? But I say that in a good way. And I think sometimes too many people get caught in this spin cycle of Jimmy Butler's leadership quality has to be that of what LeBron James does. Though they're on completely two different planets. And I think the difference from what I've seen, what other teams tried to do when they had Jimmy Butler, whether it was Minnesota, Philadelphia, or Chicago, is they tried to have Jimmy be that kind of guy that they wish LeBron would be for their roster. Whereas in Miami, Pat Riley and Erik Spoelstra knows exactly what they're getting. And they're just we just need you to be you, Jimmy. and he doesn't have to worry about that aspect. And then his leadership brand, his leadership quality, his leadership style can come out so much better for those type of guys. Like, he doesn't have to question the guys' work ethic. He knows they're going to be there to work. It's just that maybe they need to learn how to shoot. Maybe they need to learn how to execute something specific, and he can reach him in that kind of regard.
Well, you took the words out of my mouth. You got to let Jimmy be Jimmy. Like, in the most greatest of respects. I know Tom Thibodeau loved him in Minnesota, but those guys, like, I think Karl Anthony Towns is probably, after AD, he's the most talented big man in the NBA. He should be dominating both sides of the floor just like Anthony Davis does. He's not a slouch athletically. Offensively, I'd say he's probably more skilled overall, like technically gifted than AD is. But defensively, that guy I don't want to say anything disparagingly about players because I feel like it's a low-class move, especially when they're not involved in the matchup that I'm talking about. But, like, you don't need Jimmy Butler to tell you that this guy doesn't work hard on both ends of the floor consistently. Like, just watch a Minnesota game. Why have they got the #1 pick even though they've got that type of talent on the team? You know what I mean? It's like, it's Jimmy Butler wasn't the problem in Minnesota. Look at Chicago since Jimmy Butler left. They're stuck in purgatory. Like, I don't see Chicago getting out. And I'll add this. I think Billy Donovan was a really great hire now that I touched on Chicago. And Philly, well, I think that this season was the thing where we saw with Philly that there's problems there. There's huge problems there. And it wasn't just Brett Brown. I know Brett Brown was the easy scapegoat to make. That Embiid Simmons thing, it should work. Theoretically, it should, but there's something that doesn't click there. I'm not going to blame either party because I don't have information as to what the problem is. All I know is it just doesn't seem to work. Even when they play together, it doesn't even matter about injuries. But Jimmy, man, he's different. But not different, like you said, Cal, in a bad way. Different in a way that he expects you, like the old school guys. Like, he reminds me so much of a Kobe Bryant type, where he doesn't care what your skill set is. He realizes that players can't all be on the same level. But if you can't just bring that minimum of you bring your work in 100% every single day, then he has a problem with you. And I hated the fact that Jimmy was portrayed as bad guy. But it's nice to see him finally get the plaudits that he deserves as well. And then to touch on Bam, I think is magnificent. I think he's probably up there with Jokic as the best passing big in the NBA. Jokic is slightly ahead of him, but Bam is honestly phenomenal. But Goran Dragic, man, this guy is playing at an all-star level when everyone seemed to have sort of written him off at the start of the season when Kendrick Nunn started to start over him. Then obviously COVID took its hold on Kendrick and he hasn't seemed to recover, and I hope he does recover. He gets a full recovery before the start of next season because I think Kendrick Nunn is a really, really exciting, fun young player. But Dragic has been, in my opinion, the second most important player on that Miami Heat team. Just from the fact, I know Hero gets a lot of plaudits, Duncan Robinson, Jay Crowder's played like Klay Thompson in his prime in some series. It's been really, really good to watch. But Dragic, whenever they need a bucket, man, whenever there's a 7-0 swing, a 7-2, a 9-2, they give the ball to Dragic and he scores every single time.
To that point, actually, the thing that is so amazing about Goran Dragic all season is whenever they get in a spot that they just need a bucket, like you kind of mentioned, that whenever they're in a drought or a tough stretch, Goran somehow finds a way every single time to kind of get him that bucket, no matter if he can score at all three levels. So it's either a three, a mid-range, or he attacks the basket. But either way, it's always just one bucket that gets the team kind of going, and it just kind of gets them out the mud every single time.
So Brady, going to transition here a little bit, and some of, like, you gave them some love or whatever the case would be. Now pump up your team. You know, this 3-point shooting madness that's been happening with the Heat, and they started to tail off a little bit towards the end of the Eastern Conference. But that's the thing that gave me pause as the Celtics dudes. Like, you're just not going to stop and take everything away. To beat an NBA team, you usually have one or two things you can take away. But Miami's so good in a way that I said coming in, their depth is really to the advantage of no other team. Where Toronto, you didn't quite know who was going to do it. it doesn't really matter for Miami who's going to do it. And because you're going to get consistent effort defensively, and somebody always, whether that's Dragic, whether that's Hero, Duncan Robinson, is going to hit teams, or in the case of Hero, 37, freaking nowhere, to go off. So talk a little bit about that mentality that the Heat has, where anybody, it really can be just anybody's night on any given time.
Yeah, well, just to say, I think Bam Adebayo is going to get his, and Jimmy Butler is going to do what Jimmy Butler does. But I think this is going to be on, like you mentioned, Goran Dragic, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, guys like that. They're going to need to step up. Their three-point offense has been great this season. They kind of tailed off at the end of that Boston series, which it was getting kind of interesting that they were shooting the ball so poorly. But that's not going to be the case going forward. You just kind of look at just looking at Duncan Robinson, the dribble handoffs that he does with Bam Adebayo is one of the best duo kind of things that goes on in the NBA. And I think that's going to be something that can really hurt LA. That just the dribble handoff. I think Duncan Robinson could really have a very good series. He hasn't been Duncan Robinson during this playoff stretch, the Duncan Robinson that he's been all season. There's kind of waiting for that real breakout series, and I think this would be the one. Tyler Hero, obviously, that's another thing that goes on Erik Spoelstra, that you put a 20-year-old rookie, give the reins to your offense in the fourth quarter, averaging the most fourth quarter minutes on the team, is just something in itself that you have that much trust in your rookie, and he's just been amazing. Just seeing him improve, getting to the bubble with his playmaking abilities, and him being a terrible defender kind of throughout the season was interesting to see in the playoffs, because he's stepping up, kind of being an instinctive defender one-on-one, not as bad as he usually was throughout the regular season. So seeing him improve is another thing. So it's pretty much, as you mentioned, they have so many weapons, and the depth is just going to be interesting to see how they use it. You mentioned Kelly Olynyk before. I think he could be a big key for the series, just because when a guy like Dwight Howard's on the floor, I think you could use him to kind of stretch the floor. I think that's kind of the key when Dwight Howard's on the floor, to kind of get him out to that perimeter where he's not comfortable. And obviously Bam Adebayo is not going to do that, get behind the arc like that. And I think that's something that Kelly and Olynyk, Myers Leonard bring. And then the other. Go ahead.
Let me ask real quick though. Sorry to interrupt you, for sure, because you're definitely giving us some great content here. But what do you think is going to be starting the closing lineups? Because here, as you mentioned, he closes in the fourth quarter. He's playing the most minutes, you said, and it gives them another guy who can create offense, because he can dribble, he can pass. He's got a great rapport, even especially when he drives, and looking for Bam as well too. What do you think is the best five-man closing lineup for Miami against, what is going to be a bigger Laker team?
Ultimately, I don't think they're going to change up. I think they're going to go to the one that they've kind of trusted throughout this run, which is Goran Dragic, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Andre Iguodala, and Bam Adebayo. Sometimes they kind of switch out with Jay Crowder, but ultimately in the finals, you're going to go with Andre Iguodala, no question. But another thing that kind of goes on the Heat side, they have so many guys that they can throw at LeBron James. It's a stat by Second Spectrum since like 2014, being guarded by LeBron. Numbers 2 and 3 are Jimmy Butler and Jay Crowder on the guarding LeBron James, which gives him the worst field goal percentage. That's not even mentioning Andre Iguodala, what he's done in these finals in the past. So I think they have a bunch of guys that could throw LeBron, much like they did Antetokounmpo. Obviously, it's much different with that matchup with LeBron. You're not going to stop LeBron. But giving the thing is, I think with what Miami has with their wings, is they can throw guys at these star players, and they have to adjust on the fly continually. You get like a guy like Jay Crowder, who wants to be physical with you. Andre Iguodala is a high IQ defender. You got Bam, who's just a quick, lengthy guy. That was kind of what the problem was with that Antetokounmpo matchup, that he just continually had to adjust when guys were switching on him. So, and then the Anthony Davis thing with trying to match up with Bam Adebayo for a lot of times, I think. But when they're not, when they're going with their big lineup, when Bam Adebayo is going to be on the center, most likely it's going to be Jay Crowder on him. And I think you're ultimately going to see a lot of help defense. That's going to be a big thing with Anthony Davis. So you're going to kind of let some of their guards shoot. That's kind of going to be Miami's game plan, giving a little bit leeway on the perimeter and just making sure to not kind of double team Anthony Davis when he gets the ball in his spots over there either by the free throw line or that mid-range area. So there's so many things I think that this Miami Heat team has defensively, and then obviously the three-point shooting.
Alen, there's so many ways that we can look at just what Brady and what Shaw in their exchange was talking about as what could make the Miami Heat dangerous. But there's something that Brady mentioned about they have so many bodies they could throw at LeBron James that they wouldn't be able to stop LeBron James. And I think it always comes back to this caveat that no one can really stop LeBron James except LeBron James. And I think the bigger question again that's going to be raised, and I'm going to pose this so that you can address it and hopefully answer this question as to me whether or not this may actually be the key to the Lakers, winning that coveted title, or we have to start talking about this again on should they not win. But whose team will this ultimately be when it's all said and done? Who is it that the Lakers are going to ultimately need to rely on to take them to the promised land in this series? Because Shaw and I have said numerous times that if it comes down to Anthony Davis to have to shoulder that load, we do not think that he's ready. So it ultimately comes down to LeBron James. And we have seen in circumstances where LeBron James have put too much pressure on himself and not allowed himself to be the dominant player because he so much wants to get his other teammates involved. Where do you see this dichotomy for the Lakers? Because it could be, the best of riches in this. However, it could also make the worst of a situation for a great player like LeBron James.
Well, just to answer your question, it depends on a night-on-night basis. Like, it really does. We saw it in the Western Conference Finals. Like, LeBron took over Game 5, but up until then, I'd argue that AD was the better player. Ignoring Chris Webber's comments about rebounding because he doesn't get relevance to where you are on the basketball court. Because if you're guarding someone on the wing, it makes it really difficult to grab rebounds. Like, shout out to Chris Webber. Like, you're a big man. You should know this. Like, realistically, I don't feel like I'm wrong there in that statement. But AD is going through a historic playoff run, and I think that gets lost. Like, AD's averaging like 30 and 9 on like 50% shooting. He's like 35% from free. He's shooting like 77% from the free throw line. His PR's like 28, which is ridiculous. Like, he's been phenomenal. And I sort of disagree. I think AD can shoulder the load, and I think this is probably. I don't think there's anyone in the NBA that can guard AD. Like, that's been my assumption throughout the whole of the season, and watching him game by game, it's just reasserted that assumption for me. AD is a damn unicorn. Like, we call Kristaps a unicorn, AD's a unicorn. Like, there's no one. Bam's the closest guy who can guard someone 1-5 in my opinion, but even he's not on that level of like, I could trust AD to guard the best point guard on an opposing team. Like, that's how good AD is. And it all comes back to the thing, like, you mentioned the third best player on the Lakers. The third best player for the Lakers is their defense. Like, now that I'm thinking about it, that defense, man, like, we want to talk about the best defense in the NBA. And I think there's a lot of similarities in the way that the Miami Heat play defense and the Lakers play defense. The way they scramble, how their rotations work, how they sometimes throw in zones to confuse people. Like, we saw it when the Lakers went down 20 against the Nuggets. They put in that 1-2-2 zone, and it created such havoc for the Nuggets. They had no idea what was going on. Obviously, they gassed out towards the end of the game and lost that. But, like, Frank Vogel's a wizard on that defensive end as well. Like, I don't think he's as good as Erik Spoelstra, don't get me wrong, because I think, like I said earlier, I think Spoelstra's the best coach in the NBA. But AD, and then I haven't even touched on LeBron that much this podcast. Like, isn't it ridiculous
that listen, man, I tossed you a softball on this one.
Listen, I'm getting to it.
That's how much you love the Lakers. No, and listen, this to me is part of that conversation that can be had, for hours upon hours outside of just this conversation about previewing the finals. Is, as much as this is about LeBron James and his greatness, it really is about the Lakers. Like, this holistically, I can honestly say this is one of the few Lakers teams that, as much as I can loathe them, I highly respect them, because they're on a level of more of a team orientation. That's the reason why I think it's so great to see a matchup like them and the Miami Heat, because while the Miami Heat don't have like superstar players, with the exception of maybe Jimmy Butler, who's not even really a superstar yet, Like, he is a great player, but he's not superstar like LeBron or AD. But it's amazing how, as a team, as a unit, they're getting so much respect and so much love for what they've accomplished. And we're kind of doing the same thing with the Lakers, except, they got the big marquee lights, with the name of LeBron and AD on it, which I think is what makes it so fascinating.
Well, just to touch on LeBron, isn't it absurd that in year 17, age 35, coming off his first major injury, where I know they tried to play it off as like a strained, pulled groin. He tore his groin. Like, that's like commonplace now that he tore his groin. And for a 34-year-old, now a 35-year-old to come back, and I think he played a new position, basically. He's never been the main point guard on a team where he had to average 10 assists a game. He went out and did it, like, with no problem whatsoever. Defensively, he's been so good this year. I didn't expect to see LeBron so tuned in from the moment in my opinion, I know we again, on the podcast that was lost to the ether, LeBron, in my opinion, was the MVP. LeBron's the best player in the world, and I don't think there's a doubt in that now. And the fact that a 35-year-old dude is still doing it, and he's how efficient, I think he's shooting like 58% for the playoffs, and he's averaging like 27 a game. Like, it's ridiculous how good he is. And then defensively, he sort of lets AD be the leader of the defensive role. And I'm sure you saw it. There was a moment where the TNT cameras sort of zoomed in on LeBron and AD talking about like a defensive situation where LeBron messed up a little bit. And LeBron's giving it to AD, and then AD's giving it straight back to him, which wasn't like a bad thing, as you guys know. There wasn't any malice in there. They really love each other and respect each other. But it's that thing of like, LeBron has accountability on this team from AD, from Rajon Rondo, from, I got to give him his credit, Jason Kidd. I think Jason Kidd's been very integral in this coaching staff, because that's a Hall of Fame player that LeBron listens to. Like, there's no two ways about it. If J Kidd tells you something, I don't care how good, bad a head coach he was, this guy's a Hall of Famer. He knows what he's talking about. Like, might not know how to convey it in a head coaching point of view. He still knows what he's talking about. He has so much respect for Frank Vogel that this sort of was like the perfect storm for him this year. And then all the people saying he was washed up and couldn't play anymore sort of added fuel to the fire as well. And now we're seeing LeBron still be the best player, and it's not close. And it's fun to watch as a Lakers fan. I really, I always admired LeBron from afar, but it was that thing of like, I'm not really a big fan of loving superstars. I admire them, but I support the Lakers. I don't support any one player, if you get what I mean. But I always admired him from afar. But having LeBron be a part of this Lakers organization, it just makes you really appreciative that he's the leader of your team. There's so many worse people and worse players out there that could be the leader of your team. Knowing that we've got him probably until the end of his career now is an awesome feeling to have. It really is.
So I gotta transition this LeBron thing, because Brady, hey, you know about what it is to have LeBron on your team, and it led you guys to a couple of championships, multiple NBA Finals appearances, et cetera, et cetera. Talk a little bit about that from the hometown perspective. Now going up against a guy who brought you championships. What is it, 2 and 3? So what does that mean for you, and who do you think that's going to play against?
2 out of 4. 2 out of 4. 2 out of 4 championships,
2 and 3.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So
I thought you were giving the
No. So in that aspect, from Pat Riley and Spoelstra, kind of just, what does that mean? And even for you, covering, and now he is the enemy coming into this bubble for the NBA championship.
Yeah, I think you hit on it right there. This is ultimately, you can talk about LeBron versus Spo, and it's also LeBron versus Pat Riley. Those are the two big storylines heading in. Just the terms that Pat Riley and LeBron ended on before, that's kind of the big thing that everybody's talking about right now. That's going to be very interesting, but ultimately it's going to be the kind of to see how Erik Spoelstra and LeBron, that matchup goes, because Erik Spoelstra knows LeBron well, and that's kind of what everybody's been talking about. I also think, looking on the other side, I think LeBron knows Erik Spoelstra as well, but ultimately the coaching matters more than the playing matchup. So I think that Erik Spoelstra, I said it earlier, he's a guy that he always has something in his back pocket no matter what. He's always getting ready to adjust to anything. And now he's coming in with being more prepared than any other series, because he knows their star player better than anybody in the league, basically. So it's going to be interesting kind of see how he kind of goes at that matchup. I think zone. I think he goes actually defensively a little kind of using both defensive schemes that he used in the last two series, a mixture of both. Like I mentioned before, throwing a bunch of guys at LeBron like they did Giannis. Then the zone defense was something that was used very well against Boston. It started to tail off. I think it was getting a little overplayed, and they were trying to kind of figure it out. And I think they're going to use it a little bit with the Lakers, but I don't think they're going to use it as much as they did with Boston, mostly because, one, they're going to work the inside, and two, LeBron is going to pick it apart. He's going to figure it out quickly. I actually don't expect them, if they're going to go with the zone, I don't expect them to go with it and go game one. I could see them kind of waiting maybe till game two or game three to kind of, I don't think they're going to throw it out there. Because if you remember in the Boston series, he basically threw everything out there in game one, everything, threw it all out there, which is something that he usually doesn't do, which I don't think he's going to do in this series. I think he's going to kind of wait and just kind of feel everything out and see how the matchups go and then adjust from there.
Brady Hawk, Alen, Ramic joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to get my man, Brady, at Brady Hawk, BradyHawk 305 on the Twitter. And also be sure to get my man, Alen, and his show is the Lakerside Chat podcast. And you can also catch him on Twitter as well, too, at Alen Ramic. So, guys, you know what this means, right? Like we have gone at every conceivable angle, I think, that we can to appreciate, the greatness of both of these teams and the matchups that they will pose and bring. And I think that this is going to be an exciting NBA Finals. I know people had, wanted to see the Bucks versus the Lakers, or, they wanted to see the Celtics versus the Lakers, some twisted rendition of a rivalry or some sorts, or whatever the case may be. But I genuinely love that there's so many storylines that have been built from this matchup, especially since LeBron James is one of the central featured themes for this. So let's go ahead and let's do our picks, man. And I'm going to start with you, Alen, because you are all the way over there in the UK. You are going to lend us your predictions from afar. Give us your perspective. Give us your take. Who do you think is going to win this series and how many games?
Lakers in 5. I've been very consistent with that. The only team that I thought wasn't going to push us, who was going to push us, more than 5 games, was the Clippers. I thought that was going to be a 6-7 game series, but they didn't want to take their whooping like men, so they let the Nuggets knock them out. I've got to get some Clippers slander in there. They talk, so they have to expect it back. It happens, you lose like that. Respect to the Denver Nuggets for what they did, but holy crap, if that was a LeBron James team capitulating like that, we'd be hearing about it still to this day.
And firing your coach like the Clippers did today. So
yeah. But ultimately, I think, and like I mentioned, I think this is Bam's probably worst potential matchup. A guy like AD, and then you can throw a Dwight Howard at him. Even a guy like Markieff Morris, who's gone very underrated during these playoffs, and who I think's been very integral to the Lakers' success, especially in the Houston series and even in the Denver series. He just came in and did his job. Alex Caruso is, in my opinion, an elite NBA defender. We can talk about his offensive skills all we want. He's an elite NBA defender. There's no two ways around it. Rajon Rondo is also another guy, like you were mentioning, Brady, about the zone and LeBron picking it apart. You guys know Rajon Rondo is one of the smartest dudes in any room whenever it comes to basketball, even when that room contains LeBron James. Like, that's how smart I think Rajon Rondo is when it comes to basketball. So I as much as I want it to go 6 or 7, because I really, really respect this Heat team. Pat Riley, as we know his Laker lineage, you can't hate Pat Riley as a Lakers fan. I appreciate and love Pat Riley as much as I do Jerry West and, all those guys. So it's a guy who, I have the utmost respect for. Spoelstra, the best coach in the NBA. AD and LeBron, man. It's all I got to say. Lakers in 5.
Brady, what you got, man?
Yeah, I really think this has 7-game series written all over it. I just know Miami Heat's point of view that this is their aggressive, gritty team that's going to compete no matter the circumstance, especially when you had Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo leading the way. I think this is actually going to be Heat in 7. I think that to look at the head of the horse, I think Erik Spoelstra I think he should actually get Finals MVP in this finals coming up because he's going to be looked to be kind of the X factor. As I mentioned, the LeBron things, just so many things that he's going to throw out there that he's been doing. He's getting more and more credit for it, which he should, obviously. Then you got Jimmy Butler. I think that a lot of people didn't really understand him throughout this playoff run, saying he needs to score more at times when ultimately he's going to do what Jimmy Butler does no matter what. And ultimately, he didn't do too bad of a job going 12-3 in this playoff run. And then Bam Adebayo, a lot of national media seems like they just realized who he was after he blocked Jason Tatum for the win. A lot of people started to pick up on who he actually was. But really, he's been doing these things all season. He's a guy that's just going to give you the small things. That 32-point performance was amazing, but that doesn't speak the volume of the other things that he does on the court with the movement on defense and one of the best screen setters in the NBA. Just everything that he does on a regular basis. I really think that just those three things, obviously, and then the role players that they have that play in and shoot the ball so well and are they have the perfect mixture of veterans and young guys, which is pretty interesting to have the total offsetting each other. I think all those keys kind of are going to key into a 7-game series. And I actually, to Bam, him saying, you saying about Bam Adebayo, kind of they having guys kind of shut him down. I really think they do. But I think Bam finds a way to kind of figure all that out adjusting wise. And I think this is Heat in 7 with Bam Adebayo, Finals MVP.
Ooh.
All right, Shaw, you're up, buddy.
Wow, I'm torn. Obviously I live in the city of South Florida or the county, whatever, of South Florida area, and the Heat aura is around me, so to speak. Lakers are the Lakers, and one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NBA, and think just their personnel is great. I'm concerned about foul trouble for the Heat, especially in the case of Bam. So does Spo, as Brady alluded to, rely on Leonard and Olynyk and those guys to come out there, maybe even Derek Jones Jr., just to make sure that there's length on him at all times. I am wondering if they play a little bit of zone at some times as well, too, and if it will disrupt the Lakers. LeBron and Rondo, as everyone's alluded to, again, great guys who can pick apart a zone, but then it's also relying on guys like Granger and KCP to hit shots, and that can kind of come and go sometimes here and there. I have too much respect for the Heat to say they're going to be swept or even gentlemen swept, so to speak. I think the Lakers are still the better and more talented team. While everyone has alluded to Spoelstra is the best coach in the bubble, best coach in the NBA. I have a hard time seeing LeBron and AD not getting this done. So I'm going to go Lakers in 6. But a very, very competitive 6 games that, is going to garner a lot of attention for the Heat. And the one thing I'll say kind of in closing is no matter what, Miami's already gone further than they were, quote unquote, supposed to. And it's set them up right for the future. The Oladipo news today, I think, is a little fishy. Him wanting out of Indiana has his whole, thing down here in Miami going on already. So I think he might be interested. The Heat may not even be interested in him now as a result of this run. And they're setting up for Giannis potentially, next summer, so to speak. So no matter what, Miami's done more than for their franchise this year and for years to come by what they've done, getting to the NBA Finals. So they're playing with house money. But I got the Lakers in 6. What about you, Cal?
All right, man. Look, so I just can't leave my man Brady by himself. So while you're going to side with my man Alen, I'm going to continue to make a fool of myself in my predictions.
Ooh, what was I say about Brady, though? What do you mean?
No, I'm only speaking about this because our boy Jabari always gives me the side look for every prediction that I make.
Shout out to Jabari.
Exactly. Brady, you have made all of the great logical points. Now let me give you the illogical points because that's what Cal loves to do. Cal loves to give you the illogical, like, what the hell does this have to do with basketball point of view of why I would pick the Miami Heat in 6 games over the Los Angeles Lakers. And I think
in 6.
In six.
6.
I think it's for two reasons. Two reasons, and these two reasons alone. And they're all predicated on whether or not they do it or they don't. Okay. Number one, LeBron James led basketball teams on his first iteration with the new team getting to the finals. He's 0-2. He did it with the Miami Heat, lost to the Dallas Mavericks. Did it with the Cleveland Cavaliers, lost to the Golden State Warriors. Okay. So I'm not going to completely feel bad and say, oh my God, it's the greatest upset in NBA history if the Miami Heat actually upset the Los Angeles Lakers. Because usually when it gets to this point is when we really test and see the mettle of a LeBron James led team. And then it carries over into the next year that whatever the issues were that didn't get fixed going into that finals, he somehow figures it out and they go out and they run roughshod and everyone else in the NBA in year 2 of LeBron James's finals runs. Okay. So I'm going on the side of, with a team like this Miami Heat is a really well-rounded, balanced team that plays great defense. I'm not saying that they're playing all world defense, but you can make an argument that the Miami Heat are playing Golden State Warrior-like kind of defense back when you and I appreciated what they did in 2015. That can cause fits for a team that's led by LeBron James. So that's my first, per se, illogical argument. The second one is, what really has impressed me about this Miami Heat team, especially going into this series against the Boston Celtics, is their movement ability. They have all 5 bodies moving everywhere in a half-court set in transition. This is something that I haven't seen the Los Angeles Lakers truly deal with through the course of their playoff run. I thought we were going to see that with the Denver Nuggets. We did not see that. Everything was either Jokic or Murray, and everybody else just camped out shooting the 3. Spoelstra has, and we talked about this, at what makes this team really good in their ability to shoot the 3 ball the way that they've been shooting it, is that Spoelstra sets these guys up offensively to get great looks from 3. And I think this is going to test the defensive capabilities of the Los Angeles Lakers to run out and close out on Heat shooters. And then if not, the honesty has to be recognizing that they've got guys cutting to the basket constantly, cutting to the basket. No one person on the Heat is standing still watching someone do something. Very little isolation. Ball movement is key. If the Heat do that, if they accomplish that, they're going to push the Los Angeles Lakers a lot further than I think people thought that they would have been pushed had they played the Los Angeles Clippers. So I'm going on those two things. Other than that, there's no reason why we wouldn't think that the Los Angeles Lakers shouldn't win this series, because the Miami Heat have already proven that they're a team that's destined, but they could run into a complete brick wall with such a talent like the Los Angeles Lakers. But I think the Heat are destined to push the Lakers to a point where if they don't do it, they're not going to win it in 7. And if they're going to get dominated, they're going to get completely dominated by the Los Angeles Lakers. But I just see this team really surprising people and shocking them that this is a for real Miami Heat team.
Well, I think you have great points. Give me 1 second, Alen. I think you have great points in terms of, the Heat's overall determination and their will to win, and their connectivity. I mean, that's really how they beat Boston. I think they outworked them flat out, and they were always moving, and that was an amazing thing to watch and witness throughout. And that, again, you have to credit the coaching for that. And to me, there is always something about an NBA Finals, especially in this situation in a damn bubble, unprecedented. You need a little bit of luck. And to me, Miami they're just like that March Madness team that just all of a sudden starts clicking and everything is going the right way. And I think they have a little bit of luck on their side from the tragic rainbow threes or crazy reverse layups to Tyler Hero. Just, I don't care if you're defending me wet, whack, it didn't matter. That's what scares me for the Lakers in that aspect, that the Heat just consistently have that on their side. It doesn't really matter. They can put anything out there. You never know if Hero's going to drop 37, if Jay Crowder's going to drop 21, if Iguodala's going to come in and not miss a shot and score 15 points. Like, to me, that's the kind of the great unknown that gives Miami those intangibles that could push the series as deep as I think some of us are thinking. Go ahead, Alan. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's all right. Don't worry. The biggest thing that not worried me for the Heat, but that swayed me to go Lakers in 5 is the Lakers played the perfect playing series to play the Miami Heat. if anyone has as much heart as both of these two teams, it's the Denver Nuggets. And it's a team that we saw in games 3, in games 2, in games 4, in games 5. You can't let this team back in, because you give them a slight inch of opening, they'll knock the entire door down, they'll barge through it. My thinking behind it is LeBron. I know what you said about, about LeBron James led teams. They usually take a season or two, to sort of click and go into full motion. I've never seen a LeBron James team click so quickly. That's my biggest thing with LeBron. He has been different level throughout the entire year with this entire team. And, people laugh at when we say chemistry matters. The two teams with the best chemistry in the NBA are in the finals. That's the way I look at it.
Right.
The teams with the best chemistry are in the finals, and we can twist it however we want. From the top down, everything in both organizations is in sync at the moment. People gave Rob Pelinka crap. Rob Pelinka's doing a great job with the Lakers organization. Pat Riley runs that team beautifully over there. It's a really fascinating series. It really is.
Brady, any final thoughts from your end before we wrap things up, brother?
Yeah, I think you guys pretty much touched on everything. I just talking about, I think one of the interesting things talking about the similarities, though, is it kind of seems like when he mentioned LeBron kind of giving the reins to Anthony Davis to kind of take over this NBA Finals and kind of make this run. That's pretty much the same thing that the Heat have done. Jimmy Butler's basically said that, gave him the keys to Bam Adebayo, saying that this is his time to kind of take over. So it's pretty interesting how similar kind of the things are that, and even mentioning that LeBron kind of gets passive at times, pretty similar to Jimmy Butler trying to get others involved. So it's just looking at the two top duos, they're pretty similar.
Man, remarkable stuff. And I cannot thank both of you guys for hopping on board with us to really help break down this preview. This is going to be a great series, and I think the series now has been heightened even more because of your guys' intuition and insight, breaking both of these teams respectively. Once again, man, we like to thank our man, Brady Hawk. Be sure to check out his pieces. He is a contributor and Miami Heat insider for 5 Reasons Sports. Catch him on the Twitter at Brady Hawk 305. And as always, man, my man, Alen Ramic, he knows how to throw that Clipper slander real nicely. We're appreciative that you refrained though and made the focus about your Los Angeles Lakers. But he throws on an excellent podcast, Lakerside Chat. Be sure to catch him on Twitter at Alen Ramic 03. Guys, thank you so much for jumping on board with us this week, man, to break down this hellified and just what could really be a classic matchup for an NBA Finals.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, man.
All right, my man Shaw, as always, brother, this is how we like to do things, man. We like to bring out the big guns to talk about this stuff going on with the NBA, man, and I always appreciate you putting it together.
Well, last minute calls out here. So Brady and Alen answered and said, "Hey man, we got you." So we definitely appreciate that look, and we think we definitely made a new friend in Brady. We are fans and definitely following the 5 Reasons Network. And Alen, again, as alluded to, we've worked with him many times over and are going to continue to do that. So for all our fans, listeners, make sure you tune in, follow their work as well too. The Baseline NBA podcast throughout the course of the NBA Finals. Going to have some post game Twitter chats, I guess, going on after these NBA Finals games. So late night for us here on the East Coast.
Even later for me.
But it's something that we're definitely looking forward to. And then, maybe we'll get a chance to bring these guys on throughout the course of the series as well.
Absolutely. And once again, man, we like to encourage our people to be sure to check out 5 Reasons Sports Network. They are one of the premier sites that covers all things in sports, especially in the NBA. So be sure to check out the Twitter at 5 Reasons Sports. For the Baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw, once again, we'd like to thank our guests, Brady Hawk, Alen Ramic. We appreciate you guys. Enjoy the NBA Finals. We'll catch up with you